Hi there. My name is Annie Herlocker, and I'm the manager at the Richland Park Branch Library of Nashville Public Library. And we're going to do another book demonstration today. This time we're going to do something called a pamphlet stitch. So this is a very basic stitch, great for a blank book, great for making a book where you can jot your recipes down. And there's a lot of opportunity here for you to decorate the cover and to decorate the pages inside. It is a stitched book. Again, it's called the Pamphlet Stitch book, so you will need a needle and thread, but it's a really good beginner book. I hope you give it a try, and let's get started.
What you see here are all examples of a pamphlet stitch book. We have everything from a simple felt or craft felt cover to upcycled leather from an old purse I had at got from a thrift store. We have some bubble wrap here. I know some of you might have that hanging around. This is a good way to upcycle it and reuse it. We have some craft felt with some googly eyes and glitter glue and gems. A whole lot of fun with that. Even upcycled. I think this is a popsicle box. So it's always good to recycle your recyclable materials. And it's a great place, your recycling bin, that's a great place to pull from to make books or to make crafts or to really make anything you want. So this one is made from looks like a manila envelope that was with a newspaper subscription. So take a minute, think about what you want for your cover. First, I have a cutting mat. If you don't have a cutting mat, you don't need one. I find a really nice substitute is just taking several sheets of cardboard, like cardboard that your food comes in. Our food comes in so much packaging, right? So a couple of cereal boxes, just open them up flat, lay them on your table. That works really well. You mostly just need that if you're going to use the cutting knife. If you're not going to use the cutting knife, don't even worry about it. In this project, we can use scissors to cut our paper down or the knife. You would need the knife if you have a parent to help you with. Otherwise, the scissors work very nicely. You're also going to need something to punch the hole through your several sheets of paper. Here I have a bookbinding tool. This is called an awl. Now, I'm a bookbinder, right? So I have this particular tool, but there is a substitute that you can use. I'm going to show you how to use a push pin to push through those layers of paper. And some type of sewing needle. If you take a close look, you can see that the eye, or the place where your thread goes through here, is actually kind of large, and the tip of this needle is pretty blunt or pretty rounded, so I'm not going to really poke myself too hard if I hit the tip of my finger. So this is a rounded tip, larger eye needle. You're also going to need a pencil or a pen or whatever you feel comfortable with. Then you're going to need some type of cover paper. You can see in the books I showed earlier, all types of cover paper really work well for this book. As long as it can fold rather easily, you can punch a hole through it with a awl or a push pin, you're good to go. This is what I had lying around the house, so this is what I'm going to use today. It's just an envelope, a manila type office envelope. And because it has that pocket in there, it's actually going to make a really nice little bonus where I can keep things in there. So that's my cover paper. And then you're going to need 4 to 5 sheets of blank paper, or it doesn't have to be blank, it can be whatever you want, but easily foldable paper. I have 2 sheets of graph paper here. I'm a really big fan of graph paper, so I'm going to use a couple sheets of graph paper and a couple sheets of just computer paper. And that is all that I'm going to need for this book. So go ahead and gather your supplies and we'll get started. So my first step is to fold my cover paper. So for this book, I am using a paper, although I mentioned that you could use fabric. If your piece of cover paper or your cover fabric isn't already trimmed down, then you would need to decide what size you want. And your size is going to be determined by what it looks like when it's folded in half. So go ahead and think about what size you would want your book to be and cut your fabric down or your cover paper down. With this, my size is predetermined, so I'm going to just go ahead and fold it. So when I fold, I always want to fold end to end, making contact with the corners as closely as I can so that everything is in line. And then I'm just going to gently press down with my fingers And I'm going to use this handy bookbinding tool called a bone folder. This is actually made out of Teflon so it doesn't make scarring marks on the paper. And I'm just going to flatten that crease down. Now, what you can use at home is just a pencil, works just as well. So just flatten that crease down. So now I have my cover paper, and I've got this handy little pocket that'll be really fun once it's put together. So I'm going to put that to the side. Next, I'm going to take my paper, which is my graph paper and my blank paper, and I'm going to do something in the bookbinding world we call jogging the paper. So we're just going to jog it together, get it nice and flat along the bottom. And I am going to have to trim this down. So this is the step that we're working on. So I'm going to fold it again corner to corner, making sure those corners are as on top of each other as I can, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. I'm going to use my bone folder. I'll use my pencil to flatten that fold nice and crisp. I'm going to jog it again, make sure that everything is in place. So now, the problem that I have to solve, there is some problem solving involved in bookbinding, is my paper, and we'll call this what it is. This is called a section. So when you have several folios, a folio is a single sheet of paper folded. When you have several folios together, you make a section, or a text section, or a blank book section. That's what we're going to use to make the content of our book. So the way it would go is you would put that in there so you can see kind of a preview of what your book's going to look like. But oh no, this is so much longer than our cover, so we're going to have to fix that. So the easiest way is to just put that text block or that text section, nestle it right into your cover, and then I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm just going to make an outline of the cover. Kind of helps that I have graph paper. I guess I could just use the lines on the graph paper. That might work out really well. But I've drawn my lines, and now I can take my cover, set it to the side. Do you see my lines? And look, it's not perfect. You don't need to be perfect. This is going to turn out great no matter if it's perfect or not. It's a handmade book, so you kind of want it to look handmade, right? So here's where you can take either your scissors or your ruler and your X-Acto blade. I'm going to do half scissors and half X-Acto blade so you can see the process of both. So with the scissors, you would just cut along the line. Now I want to make sure my text section doesn't kind of stick out from the cover, so I'm going to cut a little to the inside of the line right here, and I'm just going to eye it. So I'm just going to go a touch to the inside of the line. These scissors are barely really working for this, so I might use a more heavy-duty scissor. And look, I have a little bit of fanning. So I'm going to grab a pair of heavier scissors, and I'm going to try to take care of that fanning by just cutting that part off. There you go. Now the next way that you could cut this, if you wanted to, was like I mentioned with the X-Acto blade. For this you would definitely want a parent. So I have my text block or my text section laid down on my cutting mat, and I'm going to put my ruler just to the inside of that line, again because I don't want my text section to stick out too much. And it's actually good if you have a little bit of your cover hanging over your inside paper. It offers a little bit of protection to keep the edges from curling. So I have my blade, you can see there, and I'm going pretty flat. The correct way to use a blade is to go pretty flat along the paper, and I'm just going to make several passes here, holding my ruler down flat. I'm going to keep making passes until I have made my way through every single sheet of paper. So I'll move some of the paper. I can see that one needs a little bit more, so I just keep going to get a nice smooth edge. So there we go. So I made a nice smooth edge with the X-Acto, and let's do the other edge with the scissors just to demonstrate how to use the scissors. Again, you go right to the inside of that line. Try to keep it from bending to prevent that fanning, and you just cut that off. That one turned out a lot better than the first one. So now you have your text section or your blank book or your recipe book, and now we're ready to punch our holes and do our sewing. And you'll see it fits really nicely right in there. Starting to look like a book. Pretty cool. So now we're ready to punch our holes so that we can sew up our book. So if you look at the inside of this pamphlet, you can see there are 3 holes punched into this text section. So there's one there, one kind of smack dab in the middle, and one there. I thought it might be fun to show off some of my binding tools called a punching jig. So this is just a piece of 2 pieces of wood joined together in a right angle, resting on a platform, and you can take your text section and your cover, nestle it in there, butt it up against this flat side, and you can just punch your holes. You can just eye it, 1, 2, and 3. That makes it pretty easy to punch the holes. It makes it quick to punch the holes, but it's really not totally necessary. And of course, I'm going to show you how to do this without a punching jig. I realize not everybody has that, right? Something that you can use in place of a punching jig would be a phone book, although these days a lot of people don't even have that. So we're going to show how to do that without any of those tools right now. So you want to make sure everything is lined up. So again, I'm going to jog my text block. I'm going to open up my cover, and I'm just going to nestle it right in there. So you want it to nestle right in like that. I want to make sure that the little yellow of the cover that I see peeking out from behind the text block is somewhat equal on each side. Looks like it's about 1/4 of an inch sliver there. Excuse me, probably a couple millimeters, not 1/4 of an inch, peeking out on either side. So you just nestle it in, and then you want to lay it flat on your table or your mat. Got that nestled in. And then you don't need to measure. There's really no need to measure the placement of your holes. You can really just eye it. So I'm going to show you how I would use an awl to do the first hole. I would just kind of eye it and say, oh, I think that's about the middle. And keeping my layers of paper flat on the table, keeping a hand there, I would take my awl, and I want that hole to go right through the fold of that paper. So, and I don't want to puncture any of the fingers on this hand, right? So I'm going to keep that hand kind of away. I'm going to fold this down and just push that awl right through. So that's what I did there, and I'll pull that out. So if you don't have an awl or anything that seems like it would work like an awl, you can use the thumbtack method. So with this method, you would want to have a cutting mat or several layers of cardboard or something to protect your surface. And again, we're just going to eye the placement of the hole. I'm eyeing that it's, maybe 3/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch from this side. And I'm just going to punch that hole. And when I think I've got it through at least a few of the layers of paper, I'm going to carefully lift up and punch through the rest. You can see it went all the way through. That's good. So again, that might be something that if you are a kid watching this video, you might want to have a parent help you. And again, I'm going to just eye it. I think that looks about right. I think I punched through enough layers that I can lift this up now and just punch it through. Hopefully it's gone through the crease of the cover. I think I did okay there. There we go. And then just remove that. So next, we're almost done. Now we need to get our thread ready so that we can sew our book together. So for the thread, I have this sort of kitchen twine that I bought from a fabric store, and we're going to use that. We do need to measure our twine. A good way to measure this, and we're not going to measure with a ruler, we're just going to measure by sight, is you want it about twice the length of the spine of your book. So the spine is this right here. This is your crease. This is the strength of your book. This is the spine. So twice the length. 1, 2, and I'm going to do 3. You know what? We're going to do 3 for good measure, okay? Especially if you've never sewn a book before, having a little extra is going to help you out. So once you have your thread, we have our piece, you're going to start sewing. So with this stitch, you start right in the middle, and essentially we're going to be sewing a figure 8. So you're going to take your needle, and you're going to punch it through both the paper and the cover. And you're going to leave another tail here. You want it long enough so that when we're done, we can tie it all together and have enough thread there that it's easy to do that. So now our thread is on the outside of our book. We want to go to the end, to one of the end holes here. It doesn't matter which one. And you're going to poke your needle through that hole. Be careful not to get it too tangled. And it will get tangled. And you're just going to pull that through gently. See, it's running right along the spine. And now it should look like this. You have your needle and thread on one end, your thread in the middle. I'm going to pull that tight. And now we're ready for our next stitch. The next stitch actually goes right across that middle thread and into our last hole. So you're just going to find that hole. And now we're on the outside again. That stitch is very loose, right? Because it went across that hole, not into it. Now we're on the outside. So you have something that looks like that. The last stitch we're going to make is going to be through that middle outside hole. Oh, and I poked right through the thread. And if you do that, an easy way to fix that is to just take your thread off the needle and just pull that back out because we're done sewing. So now you have something that looks kind of like this. You have these 2 tails and you have this cross thread. Before we tie any knots, we want to tighten everything up to make sure our binding is nice and sturdy. So you have this on the outside and you have this on the inside, and we need to tie a knot. To make it sturdy, we're going to make sure that each of these tails are on either side of this cross thread here. This is our cross thread. So I'm going to poke that thread underneath, and then we can tie our knot. So you can just tie, right over left, left over right. Okay. This will secure that thread to the paper a little bit tighter. And then you're ready to cut. So when you cut your thread, you don't want to cut it too close to the knot, because especially if you don't have wax on it, or if this is a book you're going to be using a lot like a journal, that thread could really shimmy its way out of that knot and come unsewn. You know how to sew it now, so you could just put new thread in it, but if you want to try to prevent that, cut it about a half inch away. Just cut both of those threads. So in this binding, I started on the inside so that my knot would be on the outside. If you want to have your knot as a decorative feature, then you would start sewing from the outside, and you can make it that way. So now we have our Pamphlet Stitch book, and because I ended up using an envelope, I have this fun little pocket here. So I hope you have fun with this. I hope you give it a try, and feel free in the comments below to ask questions or to show me the book that you made. I would love to see the books that you make.